They found his car at the edge of the woods, engine cold. Driver's door open, headlights still cutting through the fog. No footprints. No struggle. Just one thing on the windshield, written in dirt. Don't breathe. The sheriff thought it was a prank, until search teams started disappearing too. One by one. Each last radio transmission ending the same way, with the sound of someone holding their breath. Because in those woods, something listens, and if it hears you, it finds you. The radio crackled through the mist, a low hum cutting across the silence that clung to black pine woods. Deputy Carter pulled up behind the parked sedan, his headlights washing over the fog-stained metal. The car's engine was cold, but the driver's door hung open as if someone had just stepped out or run. Carter stepped out, gravel crunching under his boots. The forest beyond looked like a wall of darkness, thick and unmoving. The smell of pine and wet soil filled the air, sharp and heavy, like rain that never fell. His flashlight cut through the white haze, catching the faint shimmer of something on the windshield. A single phrase traced in dirt. Don't breathe. He felt it then, that strange instinct that every cop eventually learns to trust. The one that whispers, "This isn't normal." Dispatch. This is Deputy Carter. Vehicle located. Silver Honda. Plates match the missing hiker. No sign of the driver, he said. Voice steady but low. The radio hissed for a second, then the static cleared. Copy that, Carter. Stay put till backup arrives. He looked at the woods again. There was no wind, no sound of leaves. Just silence. Too perfect, like the forest was listening. He leaned closer to the windshield. The words weren't smeared by fingers. They were drawn with deliberate care, like someone took their time. And near the bottom of the glass, just under the final letter, was a faint fingerprint. Human. Fresh. He turned his flashlight toward the ground. No footprints, no tire marks leaving the area. Just the dull impression of a boot that led halfway into the trees before vanishing completely. Carter's throat tightened. He didn't like this kind of quiet, the kind that pressed against your skin until you noticed your own heartbeat. He whispered under his breath, "Who the hell writes that?" From deep in the woods, something answered. Not a word, not a sound he could name. Just a slow exhale, carried through the fog, like someone letting out the breath they'd been holding for far too long. Carter froze. Every instinct screamed to move, but his lungs refused, because in that moment, he remembered the message. Don't breathe. Carter stood motionless, his hand hovering near his holster, the beam of his flashlight trembling slightly. The fog swirled low, coiling around his boots like it had weight. Whatever he heard, it wasn't an animal. It was too controlled, too deliberate. He drew in a shallow breath through his nose and called out, "Sheriff's office. If anyone's out there, identify yourself." No answer. Just that suffocating quiet pressing in again. He took a step forward, the soft earth giving beneath him. His light caught on something snagged on a branchy piece of fabric. He reached for it, a turned sleevey dark with dried blood. It looked recent. Radio. In. Dispatch. I've got a possible sign of struggle. Blood on sight. Still, no visual. Copy. Carter. Backup's to out. Hold position. But he didn't hold. Not this time. He'd worked this county for 10 years, and he knew every inch of black pine. But this was new. There weren't supposed to be trails this far out. No camping sites, no cabins, just wilderness, thick and untouched. The deeper he moved, the quieter everything became. No birds, no crickets. Just the sound of his own boots and the faint creak of trees shifting in the cold air. 10 Sowit, barely 100 feet in a small clearing, bathed in thin moonlight. At heat's center, a ring of stones, ashes, like someone had built a fire here not long ago. But what made him stop cold was what hung above it, a nose. Rope old and frayed, swinging gently from a pine branch, even though there was no wind. Beneath it, carved into the dirt, were 5 words, arranged in a circle. If they find you, run. Carter's breath caught in his throat. His flashlight flickered, dimmed for half a second, then returned. He backed up slowly, his eyes scanning the tree line. Something was watching. He could feel it. Then a whisper so faint he almost missed it. It came from behind him. "Don't let them hear you." He turned, light slicing through the fog, but there was nothing there. His pulse thundered in his ears. He stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a root, until the beam caught something else in the distance. A shape small, low to the ground, crouched near the trees. "Hey!" Carter shouted, weapon raised. The figure darted away, vanishing between the trunks with inhuman speed. The woods came alive with Echo's footsteps, whispers, rustling leaves. Like the forest itself was breathing. And Carter realized something as he tightened his grip on his gun. He wasn't looking for a missing person anymore. He was being hunted. Carter's lungs burned as he tore through the thicket, branches slashing at his arms. The fog had thickened, clinging to him like wet gauze, blinding him to everything beyond a few feet. Every step seemed louder than it should have been. Every crack of a twig sounded like a warning. Then the sound stopped. Everything did. Even the forest seemed to hold its breath. He slowed, heart hammering, scanning the gloom. The figure was gone, but the air carried something else now. A faint, rhythmic hum, low and constant, pulsing through the trees like the woods had a heartbeat of their own. A follow d'Italiano. Against every instinct, he followed. After maybe 50 yards, the fog broke into a small clearing. There, standing half buried in the soil, was a wooden sign. Old, blackened by rot, half swallowed by moss. The words were barely legible under his flashlight's beam. Camp Hollow, established 1973. Carter frowned. There hadn't been any mention of a Camp Hollow on the county maps. And yet, here it was, long forgotten, swallowed by time. He stepped forward, crunching over something soft. He looked down. It wasn't leaves. It was fabric. A child's backpack, covered in dirt. He crouched and brushed it off. The zipper was broken. Inside, a notebook, torn, soaked, but a few words were still readable. They told us not to breathe too loud, not to look at the trees when they whisper. His breath caught. There was a smear of something dark across the page. Ink. Or not ink. He flipped another page. Miss Clara said they come for the ones who breathe when the forest sleeps. Carter's hands trembled. The notebook dropped from his grasp. That's when he noticed something glinting in the mud a few feet away. A sheriff's badge. Old Russ. He picked it up slowly. It wasn't his. Before he could think, a sound sliced through the silence. A sharp inhale. Close. Too close. He whipped around. Nothing. Then again, inhale. It came from the trees, from all around him. Carter froze. The whisper from before echoed in his head. "Don't let them hear you." He tried to steady his breathing, pressing a hand over his mouth. But the more he fought it, the louder his pulse roared in his ears. The need for air clawed at his chest. And then something moved behind him. A shay? Tall? Shadowed? Its breathing matched his own. He turned the flashlight toward it, the beam trembling, and for a split second, the fog parted a Sawa face, or something wearing one. It stared back, inches away, its eyes hollow as if carved from the dark. Carter stumbled backward, gasping. And the thing moved with him, matching his every motion, like a reflection that wasn't his. He dropped the light. The beam swung across the trees. Dozens of them, dozens of faces watching between the trunks. Every single one holding their breath. Then silence, and the forest exhaled. The world went black. Morning light filtered weakly through the blinds of the Cedar Ridge Police Department, cutting pale lines across the dust in the air. Detective Carter sat hunched over his desk, hair still damp from the rain. The woods smelled wet, pine and rot clinging to his jacket. The badge he found last night lay between his hands like a ghost from another time. He hadn't slept. Cordente. The face he'd seen in the fog, if it was a face, refused to leave his mind. Every time he closed his eyes, it was there again, breathing in sync with him. He turned the badge over. The number had almost faded. but not enough. 2,187. He typed it into the department's old database, listening to the soft hum of the ancient system. A name appeared: Sheriff Daniel Holt. Status: missing, 1978. Carter's eyes widened. Holt had been one of the earliest sheriffs of Cedar Ridge, long before Carter's time. The file was marked, archived, and flagged as incomplete. He opened it. A series of scanned documents, loaded old reports, most written by hand. Camp Hollow, 1978. Multiple juvenile disappearances. Staff, presumed dead. The photos attached were grainy, washed-out tents, collapsed in overgrowth. Cabins split open like rib. Children's shoes scattered across the ground. And one picture, Sheriff Holt himself, standing before the camp gate. The same sign Carter had found in the woods. Behind him, in the blur of the photo's edge, something humanoid seemed to be peering through the trees. Carter leaned back. He'd heard whispers about that case. An urban legend passed between rookies. Camp Hollow, the place where the woods swallowed the lost, but no one ever said the sheriff himself vanished. He printed the files and stacked them on his desk. The hum of the fluorescent light above buzzed louder than usual. Working early again. A voice. Saif. Carter looked up. It was Deputy Leela Moore. Coffee in one hand. Curiosity in the other. She caught sight of the old photo on his desk. Camp Hollow? She said. That place doesn't exist anymore. He met her eyes, then wise. They're a missing badge from there in my hand. Lila frowned. That can't be right. The Forest Department wiped that area clean after the fire in '79. They said no one made it out. Carter slid the badge toward her. I did, he said quietly. And something out there saw me. Lila set the coffee down. Her expression shifted. Not disbelief, but recognition. I grew up here, she said. My uncle worked search and rescue. He used to tell me a story about the last team they sent to Camp Hollow. Said they heard crying in the woods, but every time they got close, it stopped. One of the men disappeared that night. They said it wasn't the forest that took him. It was the sound. Carter stared at her. The sound. Yeah, she whispered. Breathing. They called it the mimic. The printer spat out the last page of Holt's file, a handwritten note from the sheriff's own report. If you hear them breathing, it's already too late. Carter folded the page and slipped it into his jacket. He stood, his voice low, steady. I'm going back out there. Lila hesitated. You sure that's smart? He met her eyes, the weight of the forest still in his bones. No, he said, but I think Holt's still out there, and I think he's been waiting a long time to be found. The forest began just beyond the old highway, where the asphalt cracked into roots and moss, and the air turned still. By the time Carter and Lila reached the edge of Camp Hollow, the sound of the world had thinned into a soft, uneasy quiet. Even the wind seemed reluctant to move. Carter parked the cruiser beside what used to be the entrance. 2 wooden posts connected by a sagging wire, and the remnants of a faded sign that still whispered the camp's name through its rot. Camp Hollow, Lila said under her breath, adjusting the beam of her flashlight. Did you ever think we'd actually come here? Carter shut the door behind him. Didn't think I'd come back alive the first time. The ground was soft with decades of fallen needles. Every step sank slightly, releasing a scent of damp soil and decay. Around them, the trees grew closer together, their trunks crooked and scarred, as if they twisted over something buried beneath. Carter's flashlight caught the outline of an old mess hall. Roof caved in, windows boarded long ago. He swept the light across it, and for a moment, he thought he saw movement, a flicker, like someone ducking behind the door. Did you see that? He whispered. Lila nodded. Yeah. They approached slowly, weapons holstered but ready. The crunch of their boots echoed far louder than it should have. Inside, the mess hall was a skeleton of what it once was. Long tables, warped by rot, metal trays covered in a film of moss. The faint smell of smoke still clung to the walls. Then a sound, a soft, rhythmic inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Lila froze. Please tell me. That's you. Carter shook his head. The sound came from the far corner, behind an overturned table. He motioned for her to stay put and stepped closer. Sheriff Holt, he said quietly. It's Detective Carter from Cedar Ridge, PD. We found your badge. The breathing stopped. He waited. Then, just as he turned his light toward the sound, a whisper brushed past him, low and hollow. You shouldn't have come back. Lila. Jelpe. The flashlight flickered, then went out entirely. Carter's heart pounded. He reached for his backup, the small one clipped to his vest. It flickered to life just long enough to reveal the table had moved, dragged across the floor by something unseen. They backed toward the doorway, breath ahead. Outside, the air had changed. Colder, denser, and in the distance, a new sound rose, faint like children laughing somewhere deep in the woods. Lila turned pale. Carter, tell me you hear that. He nodded slowly. Yeah. And it's coming from the lake. They followed the sound through the trees, flashlights barely cutting through the mist. The laughter grew clearer. Innocent, playful, but hollow. Like an echo that had forgotten what it meant to be human. As they reached the lake's edge, Carter froze. His light swept across the water, and there, half sunken in the mud, was a row of small shoes, arranged in a perfect line, and standing just beyond them, at the tree line, was a figure in an old sheriff's coat. Motionless, watching, Lila gripped his arm. Is that I don't know, Carter whispered. But if it's Holt, he's not the one breathing anymore. The figure tilted its head, slow, unnatural, before vanishing into the dark. And then, from somewhere behind them, came that same voice again, barely above a breath. Run. The woods swallowed the echo of that word run, until there was nothing left but the pulse in Carter's ears. He didn't move. Neither did Lila. They just stood there, facing the black water, the fog curling around their boots like a living thing. When the sound came again closer this time, they finally ran. Branches snapped at their faces as they tore through the trees. Carter's flashlight bobbed wildly, cutting flashes of light through the mist, the glint of wet leaves, a shadow that moved too fast, the vague outline of something following. They burst into a clearing, breathless. A crumbling cabin leaned sideways in the dirt, half swallowed by vines. Layla stumbled through the doorway, slamming it shut behind them. The silence after was deafening. Her voice trembled. What the hell was that? Carter. He didn't answer. He moved the beam of light across the cabin's walls. Drawings, hundreds of them, covered every inch. Crude sketches in charcoal and mud. Children's drawings, figures of people without faces. Trees with eyes. And one word scrawled over and over. Don't, breathed Lila, backed up, clutching her chest. I think this was one of the campus cabins. Carter walked to a small bed frame. A book lay on it, its pages fused with damp. He pried one open carefully. The ink had bled, but a sentence stood out. Miss Clara said, if you see your face in the forest, it's already too late. He frowned. Miss Clara? He flipped another page and froze. There was a drawing of a woman, tall, wearing a forest ranger's hat. Her face was blank. Lila leaned closer. That's the counselor. He nodded. And maybe she's the one who taught them to hide. Then something creaked above them. Slow, like someone stepping on an old floorboard. Carter raised his gun toward the ceiling. Stay behind me. A faint whisper drifted through the cracks in the wood. You shouldn't have taken their things. Then came another sound, a dragging scrape, circling the cabin from the outside. Lila's breath hitched. It's out there. No, Carter said quietly. It's in here. He turned just as the flashlight flickered again, and that's when he saw it. In the far corner stood a figure, still, human-shaped, but wrong. Its skin looked stretched too tight, its face sagging like wet paper, and where the eyes should have been, there were only empty, Black hollows Lila skriad. Carter fired once, the flash lighting the room for half a second. But when the light faded, the thing was gone. The only sign it had been there was a faint smell, damp soil and something faintly metallic. He turned toward Lila and froze again. A flashlight illuminated her face from below, trembling. But her expression was wrong. Too stiff. "Lila," he said softly. She didn't answer. She just smiled, a slow, unnatural curl of her lips. Then, from behind him, he heard her real voice shaking, panicked. "Carter behind you." He spun around. The thing wearing Lila's face lunged. The two crashed through the side wall of the cabin, splinters flying. Carter rolled into the dirt, scrambling for his gun. The thing stood up, its neck snapping into place with a sound like wet branches. Its stolen face was already starting to melt away. It looked at him with those hollow sockets and whispered in his own voice, "You breathe too loud." Carter fired twice. The figure staggered backward, fell, and dissolved into the soil, leaving behind nothing but a wet imprint in the shape of a human body. The forest went still again, but not silent. From somewhere deeper in the woods, another voice rose, trembling, pleading, "Please, stop taking their faces." Lila stepped beside him, shaking. "That wasn't just a legend, was it?" He shook his head. "No. And whatever that was," he glanced toward the darkness, "it's not done with us yet." The fog began to move again inward, circling. And somewhere inside it, something breathed. By the time Carter and Lila made it back to Cedar Ridge, dawn had begun to bleed through the trees, but it didn't feel like morning. The light didn't warm. The air was still heavy, as if the fog had followed them all the way back from the woods. The station sat quiet when they arrived. To QI. The hum of old fluorescent bulbs filled the silence, mingling with the smell of burnt coffee and paper dust. Carter pushed through the door to records, Lila on his heels. He was still shaking mud from his boots when he saw it. Every file cabinet was open, every drawer empty. Lila frowned. "You moved the files?" He didn't answer. He crossed to the far wall, where the archives for Camp Hollow, 1973 to 1979, were supposed to be. The tags were there, the labels intact, but the folders themselves were gone. He yanked open another drawer. Nothing. Another. Still nothing. "Carter," Lila whispered. "This looks deliberate." He turned sharply. "You think I don't know that?" His voice cracked. Stedid, Italiano. "Someone doesn't want this case remembered." She stepped closer, lowering her tone. "You think it's internal?" He shook his head. "No, this feels older, like it was never supposed to be on record in the first place." He walked to his desk and reached for his computer, but when the monitor flickered to life, he froze again. The login page didn't show his name. The screen simply read, "User not found." Lila leaned in. What the hell? He tried again. Same message. He reached for the phone. The line was dead, and then from the hallway came the faint sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Carter's hand went to his holster. "We're not alone." The lights flickered, dimmed, then steadied. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. Lila mouthed, 1, 2, 3. Carter swung the door open. Gun raised. Empty. Hallway. Only the sound of the clock ticking from the bullpen, echoing down the corridor. But as his eyes adjusted, he noticed something. All along the walls, pinned up like decorations, were old missing person flyers. Children. Camp counselors. And near the end of the hallway, one flyer stood out. It was newer. The ink hadn't faded yet. Carter reached for it and froze when he saw the name. Detective Mark Carter. Missing since June 12, 2013, the air seemed to thin. He could feel Lila's aegis on him. "Carter," she said softly. "That's ya." He cut her off. "That's me." He took a step back, the hallway spinning around him. His own picture stared back, grainy, slightly off, like a photo taken from too far away. Lila whispered, "But you weren't missing." He looked at her, his face pale under the fluorescent hum. "Maybe I was. Maybe I never came back." Before she could respond, the phone on the front desk rang. Once, then twice. Carter picked it up, slowly. Cedar Ridge, baby, a breath on the other end. Then a voice, faint, childlike. "You were supposed to stay quiet." The line went dead. Carter stood frozen by the phone, its receiver still trembling in his hand. The faint hum of the dial tone buzzed like a swarm of angry flies. He could still hear that child's whisper looping in his head. "You were supposed to stay quiet." Lila gently took the receiver from him and set it down. Who was that? He didn't answer right away. He just stared at the wall of missing posters, tracing his eyes back to his own picture. It sounded like a kid, but there was something off, like it wasn't just a voice, more like it was being played through something. "You think it's a prank?" Carter gave a humorless laugh. "If it is, someone went to a lot of trouble to rewrite history." He turned to the desk again, rifling through drawers, old memos, receipts, case notes, all stamped with the name Sheriff Holt. But every one of them looked slightly wrong. Wrong typeface. Wrong signature, like they'd been reprinted from a memory. He found one that made him stop cold. A photo salum, black and white, labeled Cedar Ridge Sheriff's Department, 1975. Holt was there in the center, standing tall, his arm around a group of deputies. But Carter noticed something strange. The background wasn't the station. It was Camp Hollow, the trees, the fence line. Lila leaned over his shoulder. "Is that the camp?" "Yeah," Carter said softly. "But look here." He tapped the photo. Behind Holt, partially obscured by the trees, stood a man, half in shadow. His face blurred, not from age or damage, but from something else. Something deliberate. "Who's that?" Lila asked. Carter didn't respond. He turned the photo over. "On the back, in faded ink, Sheriff Holt. And Deputy's June 12th, 1975, Camp Hollow dedication ceremony." Lila frowned. That date again. June 12th. Carter nodded slowly. "Same day I went missing." A chill ran through the room. A sudden flicker in the lights. The hum of the bulbs dimmed. 10 steady it. Lila whispered, "You think Holt knew about whatever happened out there?" He shook his head. "No, I think Holt started it." He took a deep breath, forcing the weight of the silence back down. "We need proof. Something physical. If they erased the files, maybe something survived off record." "Like what?" He hesitated. "The sheriff's cabin. Holt had a private place up near the ridge. Said he went there to hunt, but no one's been up there since he died." Lila gave him a look. "And you want to go now?" "Before someone else does." The rain had started by the time they reached Holt's cabin. The dirt road snaked through the trees, swallowed by fog and pine. The headlights barely cut through it, catching only glimpses of wet bark and glistening moss. The cabin itself was old, a dark silhouette hunched beneath the trees, its porch sagging like a broken jaw. Carter stepped out first, flashlight in hand. The door was locked, but the wood around the frame was rotten. One good shove, and it creaked open. Inside, the air smelled of mildew and dust and something else. Something metallic. "Blood," Lila murmured. Carter's beam swept across the walls. Photos, maps, newspaper clippings, all pinned up like some obsessive collage. Articles about Camp Hollow. Missing children. Obituaries. Police promotions, and in the center, a large black and white photograph of the Cedar Ridge Sheriff's Department. But where Sheriff Holt's face should have been, there was nothing. "Someone had cut it out," Lila whispered. "He erased himself." Carter's voice dropped low. "No. Someone erased him for a reason. He scanned the wall again and noticed something else. A note pinned behind one of the clippings, written in shaky handwriting. The sheriff was never real. The flashlight flickered, and from somewhere deep inside the cabin came the sound of a door closing. The sound echoed like a heartbeat through the rotten cabin. Thud, click. A door closing somewhere inside, though neither of them had moved. Lila froze. Tell me, that was the wind. Carter lifted his flashlight toward the back of the cabin. No wind shuts doors. They moved carefully, their footsteps soft on warped floorboards that moaned under their weight. The walls seemed to breathe with the flicker of their lights peeling wallpaper, framed certificates, and dozens of yellowed photographs staring down from the dark. Each photo looked more distorted than the last, faces blurred, names blacked out, details rewritten. Holt's face gone from every one. They reached the end of the hall, a small kitchen, untouched for years, set cloaked in dust. But behind the refrigerator, half concealed by a warped panel of wood, Carter noticed a sliver of iron, a latch. He brushed off the dust. The metal was cold, unnaturally so. Lila, look at this. She leaned in. A log. No. He pried at it until the board shifted with a dry groan. Beneath it, a small trapdoor revealed itself, barely large enough for one person at a time. No hinges, no light seeping through, just a square of darkness that felt aware. Carter shone the beam down, but it seemed to swallow the light. There's something under here. Basement. He shook his head. This cabin was never supposed to have one. For a long second, neither spoke. The silence was heavy, the kind that felt like someone else was listening. Then, without another word, Carter pulled the latch. It opened with a hiss, as if air had been trapped beneath it for decades. A faint, cold draft brushed against their faces. The smell was old, wet earth, rust, and something that reminded Carter of rain-soaked photographs. They descended carefully. The steps were made of rough stone, slick with moss. The deeper they went, the colder it grew, until their breath came out in soft clouds. Lila whispered, "What is this place?" when they reached the bottom. The flashlight beam finally landed on something that made them both stop. Rows of filing cabinets lined the stone walls, dozens of them, each labeled with names, dates, case numbers. Some names they recognized from the missing posters upstairs. "Camp Hollow Records," Lila said softly. He hid them all down here. Carter stepped closer to one labeled 1975, intake 001025. The cabinet squealed open. Inside, neatly stacked folders, each with a photo paper clipped to the top. Children. Every one of them with the same hollow eyes. Lila covered her mouth. "These are missing kids," Carter finished. He flipped one open. It was a report, typed cleanly, stamped with the sheriff's insignia. But where the officer's name should have been, it was blank. No signature. No ID. No origin. And beneath the report, another photograph. A group of children standing in the woods at night, holding lanterns. Their faces blurred, except one. Carterese. Carterese. He felt the blood drain from his body. Lila grabbed the file. "That can't be. It's me." His voice was barely a whisper. "That's me. But I was 10. I don't remember this." Before she could respond, the lights flickered, not from their flashlights, but from something unseen deeper in the room. A faint glow, pulsing. Carter turned. At the far end of the basement, a door stood half open, made of iron sealed with rusted bolts. A single light leaked through the cracks, pale and unnatural. Lila whispered, "You sure you want to open that?" Carter stared at it, heart hammering. "I think that's where I disappeared." He took a step forward. The air thickened, humming faintly with something electrical, something almost alive. And from behind the door came a voice. Small. Familiar. "You weren't supposed to come back." The flashlight shook in Carter's hand. because this time he recognized the voice. It was his own. Carter's hand trembled as he gripped the rusted handle of the iron door. The metal was colder than ice, biting into his skin as if the cabin itself didn't want him to open it. Lila's hand hovered over his shoulder, hesitating, but she didn't stop him. Neither of them had any choice now. He pulled. The bolts groaned and screamed against decades of corrosion. Finally, with a long, metallic shriek, the door swung open. A blast of cold air hit them, carrying the scent of wet earth, decay, and something metallic, sharp, like blood. Inside was a chamber, carved directly into the bedrock. The walls glistened with moisture, and the floor was slick with mud. A single beam of pale light came from above a small shaft in the cabin floor. Dust swirled in it like tiny ghosts, but it wasn't the light that caught their attention. It was... The mirrors, rows upon rows of mirrors lined the walls, some fractured, some intact. Each reflected a different angle of the room and of themselves. Lila's reflection flickered strangely, like a film running backward. Carter's image shifted unnaturally, his face blurred and then snapped back with a clarity that made his stomach tighten. In the center of the chamber, on a stone pedestal, lay a small notebook, leather-bound, weathered, and covered in dirt. Carter stepped closer, eyes fixed on it. Every instinct screamed danger, but he couldn't stop. It opened, Italiano. The first page was filled with handwriting, neat, deliberate. Camp Hollow was never just a camp. It was a mirror, a place where the lost could be reflected and captured. Sheriff Holt was the first to learn the truth. I was the next. Carter's blood ran cold. Captured, Lila whispered. He turned the page. Photos had been glued into the notebook. Faces of children, counselors, deputies, and one younger boy who looked eerily familiar. The boy who vanished. The boy who returned. The boy who could not remember. Carter's hand shook. The boy, the reflection. It was him. Carter, Lila's voice broke. That voice we heard. It's you, but not really you. He swallowed hard, staring into the mirror opposite. His reflection blinked, but his lips moved without him speaking. A whisper echoed from the mirrors. You were never gone. Only mirrored. Carter staggered back. The notebook slipped from his hands. It landed open on a page filled with a diagram of the forest, lines tracing paths, circles marking clearings, and a single X over the iron door. This is why the town forgot, Carter muttered. They didn't just erase files. They erased memories. We were never supposed to exist outside this place. Lila stepped closer, gripping his arm. Then, the people who vanished. The sheriff. The kids. They're all trapped here. Carter's eyes swept the mirrors again. Every reflection seemed to shift, showing glimpses of the woods, the lake, and shadowy figures moving behind trees. They're not dead, he said quietly. They're just stuck. From somewhere deeper in the chamber, a sound began to grow low, wet, and breathing. Not a whisper, this time. Not a trick of the light. It was coming from the mirrors themselves. Carter's heart pounded. Lila, we need to go further. We need to see the center. That's where the truth is. She nodded, trembling. I just hope the truth wants to let us leave. The mirrors flickered again, and Carter saw a figure standing behind him in the reflection. A boy. His boy. But older. Hollow eyes. Blank expression. And holding. He's Bodge. The last thing Carter heard before stepping forward was a whisper, almost like the air itself was speaking. Welcome home. Carter stepped cautiously into the chamber. Lila closed behind him, the notebooks and papers scattered at their feet. Every mirror reflected their movements, but something was off. The reflections lagged slightly, like echoes of themselves, twitching unnaturally. He froze when he noticed them figures standing just behind the mirrored versions of themselves. Hollow-eyed children, counselors, deputies. Their mouths moved, but no sound came out. Their faces were blank, stretched in ways that felt wrong. "They're trapped in the mirrors," Lila whispered. Her voice trembled. "All of them. And that boy. You." Carter swallowed. I never left." He moved closer to the center of the room, where the largest mirror stood, framed in rusted iron and etched with strange symbols. The surface rippled like water, and inside it he saw the forest outside, distorted, twisted, alive. Shadows moved among the trees, and glimpses of missing faces flashed in the mist. A whisper slithered across the room. "You should never have returned." Carter realized it was coming from the mirrors themselves, not from the air, not from the walls. From the trapped souls. Their fear and anger and grief were concentrated, pulsing. He touched the mirror. It rippled beneath his fingertips, cold and wet, almost like he was pressing against water. Lila grabbed his arm. "Don't." But Carter stepped closer. The mirror didn't resist it, welcomed him, drawing him in with a tug on his chest, a pull on his mind. He saw his younger self, standing in the woods, lost, afraid. The boy looked at him with hollow eyes, repeating the same word he had whispered so long ago. "Don't breathe." Carter's vision swirled. The walls, the floor, even Lila's reflection began to fracture. The hollow-eyed figures stepped closer to the mirror, reaching out, mouths opening, silent screams echoing in the darkness. "You're one of us now," a voice hissed, high-pitched, childlike, and familiar. The boy never left. Carter's mind raced. He understood now Kambosan. A place of death. It was a prison, a mirror realm. Holt had learned its secret. The townspeople had forgotten because the mirrors had hidden the evidence, and every child, every missing person, every corrupted officer was trapped within the reflection of the world. He turned to Lila. "We have to break it. We can't leave them like this." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "But how?" "Impossibile." Carter scanned the room. The notebook had fallen open near the base of the mirror. The pages were filled with instructions, diagrams of rituals, lines connecting the trees, the lake, the iron door, and the mirror. This is the key," he said. "The mirror has a weakness. The center of the chamber, the iron frame. If we disrupt it, we can release them." A sound rose from the mirrors, a low, keening wail that shook the chamber. The hollow-eyed figures pressed forward, faces blurring and twisting, almost reaching them. Carter and Lila grabbed the heaviest iron tools they could find. Around from the cabin's frame, a broken chair leg, and approached the mirror's edge. "We're going in," Carter said, voice steady despite the fear twisting in his chest. "Together," Lila replied. The mirror rippled, the wails grew louder, and the hollow eyes of the trapped souls bore into them. Every reflection of Carter, every memory of the boy he once was, surged forward. The air felt alive, pulsing with energy, as if the entire forest, the camp, the woods, the town itself, had become a single, sentient trap. He took a deep breath. This time, not the boy's whispered "don't breathe," but his own. And then they struck. Carter and Lila stood before the massive mirror, hands gripping iron and wood, hearts hammering in sync with the wailing voices around them. The hollow-eyed figures pressed closer, their silent screams a cacophony of despair that reverberated through the chamber. Every reflection twisted unnaturally, showing not just the present, but memories, fears, and the echo of every lost soul trapped inside. Carter looked at Lila. "Ready?" She nodded, teeth clenched, her hand shaking around the rod. "Do it!" They struck together, metal colliding with the iron frame of the mirror. The sound rang through the chamber like a gunshot, echoing endlessly off stone walls. The hollow figures recoiled, writhing as if the impact sent ripples through their very existence. The mirror itself trembled, the surface undulating like water. Faces appeared and disappeared in the glass. Children, counselors, even Carter as a younger self, all reaching out, mouths opening in silent pleas. A cold wind swirled through the basement, tugging at their clothes and hair. Carter realized the mirror wasn't just glass. It was alive, breathing, protecting itself. "Keep hitting it," he shouted. Lila swung again, striking the lower corner of the frame. Cracks began to spiderweb across the surface, light flickering violently through the fissures. The wails grew louder, closer, almost deafening. And then Carter heard it, the whispered voice of the boy he once was, echoing from inside the mirror. "Breathe, or you'll stay too." Carter clenched his teeth, ignoring the fear that rose in his chest. He inhaled deeply. A slow, deliberate breath. Lila mirrored him, their lungs filling, steadying, and with that single breath, something changed. The mirror pulsed violently, a shiver running through the cracked glass. Light burst from the fractures, illuminating the chamber with pale, otherworldly brilliance. The hollow-eyed figures paused, their twisted forms shimmering as though seeing themselves for the first time. Carter struck again, this time at the center of the iron frame. The mirror screamed, a sound that cut through the wails of the trapped souls. Cracks expanded rapidly, spider-webbing outward until the surface began to splinter and collapse inward. Lila gasped. "It's working." The hollow-eyed figures began to dissolve, their forms unraveling into threads of light that floated toward the cracks, then dissipated into the air. Children, counselors, deputies, all released from the mirror's prison. Carter saw his younger self step forward, blinking in wonder, before vanishing into the light with a final smile. The chamber grew silent. The wind calmed. The mirror, once a living prison, now lay shattered, shards scattered across the floor. The oppressive weight of the forest, the camp, and the town's forgotten history lifted. Carter sank to his knees, exhausted, heart racing. Lila crouched beside him, shaking but alive. "They're free," he whispered. She nodded, tears streaming. "The ones who vanished. All of them." He looked at the iron shards, glittering in the pale light. Camp Hollow. The town, it's all going to remember now. We'll make sure no one forgets again. From above, faint sunlight pierced the small opening in the cabin floor. For the first time in decades, the forest outside seemed still, almost peaceful. The air no longer carried whispers or wails, only the sound of leaves rustling in the breeze. Carter exhaled, letting the tension leave his body. "We survived it," he said softly. "And now, maybe the town can too." Lila smiled faintly. "And we'll never forget." He nodded. Then, as they climbed back into the daylight, the forest seemed to sigh a long, quiet exhale, carrying with it the relief of the lost finally returning to memory. The shadows receded, the mirrors were broken, and Cedar Ridge, for the first time in decades, could breathe again.